My name is Casey, and I was raised in a narcissistic family. Today, I'm going to be reading some stories from the Raised by Narcissists subreddit. Something that's been so beneficial for me throughout my healing journey has been perspective. And that's something that I've gained from people in my real life, books that I've read, and from other people sharing their stories online. And it wasn't until I started sharing my own experience that I was finally able to realize just how widespread this community is. Reddit has been a huge source of information and inspiration for me throughout my healing journey, so let's get into some of these stories. All right, the first one is titled, Losing Friends as You Heal from Abusive Parents. Have you lost some of your childhood friends as you've slowly grown out of your people-pleasing habits? As someone who was raised by an abusive father, I slowly learned that it was better not to say anything at all than to risk angering him. I adopted the philosophy of sucking up my feelings and never speaking out when someone upset me. Over the past 2 years, I, now 22 female, have had a few childhood friends that I've had to part ways with. Both splits originated from our first major conflicts in the friendship. In both situations, I refused to compromise my stance, something that took a lot of emotional strength for me to be able to do. I do not regret leaving behind those friendships. I would do it again, but sometimes I wonder if these friends were only friends with me because of how previously amenable I had been. The friendships fell apart at the first sign of conflict where I had been unwilling to compromise my feelings of having been wronged. Is this something you have noticed in your relationships? Please share your thoughts, feelings, or opinions. I actually had a really similar experience to this a couple years after moving out of my family's house. So I guess for a little bit of background, when I was growing up in elementary school, I didn't really have like a circle of friends. I didn't have a lot of opportunity to socialize with kids my age outside of school. And so I found my first real friend group when I was in high school. And so I had kind of like this group of girls, and I would say we were friends for about a decade before we had any real controversy or argument. And so, growing up in a narcissistic family, very similar to what the original poster said, you kind of learn that it's better to not say anything or to say and do what your narcissistic parent wants you to do instead of voicing how you truly feel about a particular situation or a person or an experience, whatever it might be, because you don't want to risk upsetting that person. It's just easier to kind of play along or to keep your feelings to yourself and say nothing. And so that, I think, leads to a lot of people-pleasing tendencies, which is something that I struggle with a lot even still. And I think I subconsciously maybe applied that same way of thinking to my friendships, to all relationships in my life, including my friends. And so not that my friends would ever treat me badly, looking back when I was younger. We had a good relationship. I think there was a certain level of mutual respect there. But I never would say anything negative, or if anything upset me or rubbed me the wrong way, I would never stand up for myself. And I do remember a couple of times when we had little tiffs here or there, feeling like, listen, like if I just want to make up with them at the end of the day, like if we're going to get past this, then it's not even worth me saying how I really feel. Like, we can just bypass all of that and move on. Like, it's fine. I can handle it. But after I moved out of my narcissistic parents' house, I felt like there were so many emotions that kind of hit me all at once. Because all of a sudden, everything in my life had been completely turned on its head. One day, I was living with my family in my childhood bedroom with my siblings and my parents, and everything was fine. I was kind of believing the same things that I had believed for most of my life. And then the next day, I was living in a new place. I was no longer in touch with my siblings. I wasn't talking to my parents. And if I was, it was guilt tripping and shame and blame and all of these really negative emotions. And now I was kind of gaining outside perspective for the first time in my life, and I was starting to see how not every family exists the way my family existed. And so I was starting to see a little bit more of that negative behavior that I had grown so used to in the light and kind of see it for what it was. So dealing with that, all the while, I guess, coping with the loss of some of the closest relationships that I had had in my life for most of my life, led to me dealing with some real serious separation anxiety. And I, at this point, had no idea what narcissism was, what gaslighting was, what separation anxiety was or felt like. All I knew was that I was latching on to my relationship with my husband. I was inconsolable anytime we would be apart because I felt like something really bad was going to happen to him, or something was going to happen in our lives when we weren't together that were going to prevent us from being together again. And it took me a while to realize that I had just gone through a really traumatic experience with my parents, and I kind of lost that relationship, which was a really close relationship in my life. And so I think on some level, I was just fearful of losing another really valued relationship in my life. And so there was a time, not to mention this was all around COVID. So we were no contact, everyone was kind of quarantining. I was home with my husband and we were just starting a business together. So those two things alone were a little bit isolating for even the healthiest of people in terms of mental health. But I think coming off of the back end of breaking out of a narcissistic family like that, it just intensified those emotions. And so there was a chunk of time there where, first of all, I couldn't really see my friends who I had been friends with since high school. And then also, on the rare occasion when we would have an opportunity to see each other, I didn't feel comfortable going to, that hangout or whatever it might be alone. Without my husband. It wasn't something that I felt like I was able to do in that moment. So I remember, it all kind of like came to a head one night, and it was just the energy was weird, and I decided to address it, which, similar again to the original poster here, that in and of itself took a lot for me to actually stand up for myself in a way and to express how I was feeling, because that was something that I had never done really in my life before, especially, outside of the relationships with my immediate family. And so to do this and to kind of stand up and voice my true feelings and I guess just let them in on what was going on inside my own head as far as I could understand in the moment was a really big step for me. And I remember that just being met with a lot of negativity, which I really wasn't expecting, because the way that I presented it was just kind of like, hey, like, this is where I'm at right now. And like, I just need you to kind of be patient with me and like to be here with me. And that was kind of the gist of it in my mind. And I remember kind of going back and forth with them. And it was the first time in our friendship that I really stood my ground. And I think it was just because I wasn't physically or emotionally able to make that decision. I wasn't ready to deal with something that I hadn't even begun to process yet. I couldn't overcome something that I didn't know I was even dealing with, I guess. So I was just communicating how I was feeling as honestly as I could and as accurately as I could. And I dug my feet in the sand because I felt like I couldn't do anything else. And that, for me, resulted in our friendship kind of going away. And, initially, it was really difficult for me because I had just lost my relationship with my parents and a sibling of mine. And so now, a couple years later, I'm losing these other relationships, 3 of them. These are people that I've had in my life for a decade at this point, who I genuinely thought would be like bridesmaids at my wedding, or like my kid one day would call them aunt so-and-so. And so the fact, or I guess the thought, that like this first sign of controversy where I stood my ground was enough to just dissipate the friendship, or just to kind of like break it up and dissolve it, I guess is the word, was upsetting to me. But I had to let it go. And, looking back, it did prompt me, I guess, to kind of question what my role was in those friendships for the years that we were friends, especially now starting to understand how I struggle so much with people-pleasing tendencies, where, maybe I was a really convenient friend. I never caused any waves. I was always very reliable. I was always so quick to put everyone else's wants and needs before my own, and never really prioritized the things that I wanted to do. So maybe in a lot of ways it was a convenient friendship. And, that's okay. I feel like I've come to terms with that, and I'm at peace with that in my life, because we did have a lot of really good times. Now, I think at this stage in my healing journey, I'm a couple years removed from that incident, I'm able to look back at it in a more objective way, I guess, kind of take some of the emotion out of it. And I'm proud of myself for standing up for myself in that moment, and even though I don't think I was fully aware of what was going on in my own mind, I was communicating how I was feeling as best I could. And that was uncomfortable for me, but I did it. And it just kind of makes me realize that relationships do come and go. You know, there are some times where there are some people who are meant to be in your life for a certain amount of time and maybe not forever, even if that's different than what you thought at the start of your relationship, or even maybe halfway through. You know, maybe you thought these were people that I'm going to know forever. And that might be the case, it might not be. And I think you just kind of have to trust sometimes in the process that whatever is meant for you will find you. And if it's meant to stay, it will. If not, it won't. And that's okay. All right, the next one is titled Panic/Anxiety Attacks After Leaving. It's almost a year since I moved. Since I left, my life has improved in different areas. However, one of the negatives I need help with is how good my mind is at holding back whatever negative emotion is present until it comes out in anxiety/panic attacks. I have quite a few triggers, but there's one trigger that's been popping out more as of recently. I have this fear of losing people I care about. It's just like there's a sudden thought something could happen to them and I spiral. I reflected a whole ton on this and I realized that it must be because I don't want to lose any more people in my life. When I moved, I lost the relationship I had with my parents and whatever extended family I have left. The move also severely damaged the relationship I have with my sibling. I don't have a relationship with them anymore, regardless of how much I try. People care about their loved ones, but the thought of something happening to them is distant in our minds. We're like, yeah, it could happen, but not anytime soon. The whole experience has really driven in how easy it is to lose someone you care about. Something tiny or big could instantly take them away from you, and I'm scared. I only have a few people left in my life that I care about, and I'm terrified daily that something might happen to them. I only have a few people in my life that I care about left, and I'm terrified daily that something might happen to them. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm insane. When I have these panic/anxiety attacks, all that fear is concentrated into those moments, and I genuinely feel like someone is about to die. I don't know what I can do. I'm trying to get a therapist. Any advice would be appreciated. Thank you. This is another one that resonated with me right off the bat. And that's one of the reasons that I love reading the stories from this subreddit, because there were so many emotions and experiences that I had dealt with that I felt kind of alone in until I came across this subreddit. And even just from the title, sometimes I felt so seen and validated because I was like, this is exactly something that I have gone through. And I didn't understand maybe what it was or where it came from, or even the fact that other people experienced this too until I saw this post. And so that's why I'm so excited to be sharing all of these stories along with my perspective on the situation. And I guess a little bit of insight from someone who has gone through it also. I had my first real panic or anxiety attack. I don't think I've ever had a panic or anxiety attack before the story that I'm about to tell you. I'm not certain because looking back, I was a little bit more of an anxious kid, but I never really knew what anxiety was. But this moment for sure was like, I can pinpoint this as being like an actual anxiety attack. And it happened the night before I moved out of my family's house. And it was just 30 minutes of me not being able to breathe, feeling like I couldn't catch my breath. I was in shock. I was panicking. I felt like life wasn't real for a time. And it took me a really long time to kind of regain control of my breath and to just calm down. And so the next day, I move out of my parents' house, and for the next little chunk of time after that, I would say probably the next year or so, maybe even longer, I suffered a lot from intrusive thoughts. And again, this is all without knowing anything about narcissism, intrusive thoughts, emotional abuse. And so I was just kind of feeling all of these things. I was in the thick of it without being able to remove myself from the situation and say, oh, hey, like this is what you're feeling right now, and this is probably where it comes from. And so I was dealing with a lot of really negative, intrusive thoughts that would play on my deepest fears and insecurities. And one way that these intrusive thoughts manifested themselves for me was in nightmares, where for a year, I would say at least 3 or 4 days out of the week, every week for a year, I would have the same nightmare of not being able to get to my husband, where I would be existing in this environment and I would notice that, like a lot of time has gone by since I've last heard from my husband. Like I should probably reach out to him or try to get to him. And it was always something preventing me from getting to him, whether it was I couldn't dial his phone number or he wasn't picking up the phone, or, it's always really hard to read in dreams, like to interpret letters and numbers, so I couldn't text him. I couldn't find a car to drive to his house, whatever it might be, I couldn't get there. And so I was panic stricken. And this happened for a long time. And I eventually stopped having these dreams, but the intrusive thoughts kind of persisted. And, that feeds into what I was talking about in the last post with this separation anxiety, where, anytime my husband and I were apart, I genuinely felt like there was a possibility, I guess even a likelihood, that either something tragic was going to happen that was going to result in us never seeing each other again, or something was going to change in my husband's life that took him away from me, like a really great opportunity, or, a trip somewhere, or a job, whatever it might be. I thought that when we weren't together, something was going to happen, and then we were no longer going to be together, or we might not be together for a chunk of time, and then that was going to completely ruin our relationship. And I was petrified of that happening. And I remember so many times just being inconsolable and telling myself, growing up in a narcissistic family without even knowing what it was, you're still dealing with a lot of stress and tension and negative emotions. And amongst all of that, I remember being really positive and kind of being good at talking myself out of these negative situations and finding the positive and the silver lining. And, I remember trying to tell myself all of these things in those moments where I'm like, listen, this is just a feeling, like it's going to pass and he's going to come home and like everything is fine, like you're okay. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself of that, I would not believe it. I couldn't believe myself because the emotion was so strong and powerful, it overpowered any kind of logic or reason that I was trying to kind of instill in myself in those moments. And so I think I probably had like a series of a few panic or anxiety attacks following moving out of my family's house. And, even if it wasn't a full-blown attack, I carried that anxiety with me daily, and I still sometimes struggle from anxiety, resulting from, I think, losing relationships that were so important to you that lasted for such an extended period of time throughout your life. I think also growing up in a narcissistic family, for me anyway, I was so sheltered and controlled, and a lot of the family values that were instilled in me were along the lines of, if we can't all do this thing together, then none of us should do it. It's like if we're going to do something, we're all going to do it together. And family traditions are important, and we're going to, do this, that, and the other thing, and they hold a lot of value, and I'm going to get mad at you if you miss this or if you're late to this because it's really important. Or, we don't talk about what goes on inside this house anywhere else, because this is a family matter. I think in a lot of strange ways, like family was preached to me. And so those relationships held a lot of value for me. They were very important to me. And I always cared, obviously, if I was in good standing with my parents, I wanted to make them proud. I wanted them to think highly of me. And so we had a really close-knit relationship for a long time. I just think due to the nature of our relationship, and losing that, realizing that I can make a decision that I feel is best for me in my life. And that is going to result in me losing two of, the most long-term involved relationships I've ever had, with people who are supposed to love you unconditionally and be your biggest support system. That was a really hard thing for me to grapple with. And I think that translated into fear of losing other relationships in my life. And then again, with that friend group of mine where we had been close for a decade. I mean, like talking daily, all throughout the day close. And then again, to see that like one little thing can just completely dissolve that relationship and you will never have that again. It makes a lot of sense looking back how that would translate to a real significant fear of loss. And so something that's been helpful for me to deal with, both losing friends while healing and the panic and anxiety and the fear of losing people close to you throughout my healing journey, I guess, has just been understanding where these emotions come from. Because, for a time, I remember feeling like this was just the way that I was. There was nothing I could do to really control these emotions. And, they were going to happen. They felt so real to me. And once I was able to start understanding like where they came from. I was able to start tracing these things back to the root of the issue. And then I was starting to kind of realize that, okay, I'm not the only person who experiences this or who feels this, right? This is a common thing. This is a fear that other people have encountered. It's not who I am. It's not inherently a part of me. It's a result. It's an emotion, I guess, that's a result of something that's happened to me. And that's kind of how my body is processing it and protecting myself. And so giving these things a name and understanding that I didn't always feel like this is a result of something that happened to me, allows me to now feel like I don't have to feel like this anymore moving forward, because I can let go of that fear. I'm in a safe space now. I'm in a healthy relationship now, and this isn't going to happen again. Or if it does, right, I'll be more informed going into the situation, and I'll understand how to handle myself, if and when this thing does happen again. I'll be okay, because mentally I'm in a better place, and I understand what this looks like. So it's really complicated. And I feel like the nature of your relationships that kind of come and go throughout this time are so deeply rooted and maybe highly valued that the emotions are so intense. And it can be really difficult to let those things go and to kind of reconcile the loss that you endure while healing and breaking out of a narcissistic family. So those were two really great stories, and I'm so glad that we got to address those topics. But that's about all the time that I have for this today. This is a new video series that I'm going to be putting out. I'm going to be trying my best to get 2 out each week, because these are really such interesting topics, and I know how important it is to keep this conversation going, because so many of these emotions and experiences resonate not only with me, but with so many of you. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you like this video down in the comments. Also, if there's anything else that you'd like for me to talk about, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I've got podcast episodes coming out every week and some more Raised by Narcissists subreddit stories. Bye!